Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Alan Murray and I'm Senior Lecturer in Enterprise at University of West of Scotland. So firstly, a big thanks and a warm welcome to everyone joining us live on Facebook, Twitter and YouTube for the latest event in our Entrepreneurship discussion series. And today I'm standing in for my colleague Yemi, who's the real brains behind these events. And unfortunately, Yemi can't host the event today as she's currently on holiday. So it falls to me to try and fill her shoes. So for this session, we're looking at the area of women in business. And for this, Yemi has lined up two great speakers for us to listen to. So in terms of how things will run today, in a moment I'll introduce the first speaker who'll be sharing stories from her own journey, as well as some inspiring lessons she's learned from others along the way. I'll then introduce our second speaker, who'll tell us about her own experiences. Following this, we'll then move on to the Q&A session, where we'll present our guest speakers with questions from the online audience before I then close the event. And we expect the overall event to last around 2 hours, but if things run on, then so be it. And remember, we always encourage you to submit comments, questions, and even messages of encouragement via any of our various streaming platforms. And with the help of my colleague Emma, working hard behind the scenes, hopefully the technology won't let us down. However, as we know, when we rely on technology, it can sometimes fail. So if we lose the feed altogether, we'll attempt to reconnect, or failing that, we'll reschedule the event, but hopefully it won't come to that. And lastly, apologies in advance if any of us on screen are invaded by partners, dogs, cats, or Amazon deliveries, or small children, which in my case is always quite likely. So before we start, I just wanted to say a few words about why we do this type of activity here at UWS. So I think we'd all agree that we live in very unprecedented times, and whilst the UK, as the fifth largest economy, has continued to punch well above its weight, it still demands that people acquire the skills needed to start businesses or to be successful in the organisations which employ them. Essentially, the purpose of these events is to support the university's efforts to develop the enterprising capabilities of our students and also the wider communities that we serve. And a tried and tested way of achieving this is to bring in people with relevant and inspiring stories to talk about their own personal entrepreneurial journey. And what we're trying to do here is to get insight into as diverse a range of experiences as possible across the different fields of entrepreneurship, whether that be business entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship, technology entrepreneurship, or corporate entrepreneurship, which is being enterprising within the context of an organisation that employs you. So now I'm going to give a brief introduction to the first of our speakers, Diane Burridge. Now, Diane has almost 20 years experience in community finance, and she was the CEO of Moneyline, which is a leading not-for-profit community development financial institution with a mission to transform the way low-income households access fair and affordable financial products. Diane has built a customer-focused brand, delivering innovative products grounded in the insight from the communities that they serve. And her work and her leadership has raised the bar for what people expect from financial services in the UK. Diane is also an alumni of the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses Programme and has also studied at Harvard Business School. Diane has extensive financial inclusion and social sector knowledge and contributes to various advisory groups with JP Morgan, the Centre for Social Justice, the Finance Innovation Lab, and the Cabinet Office, to name but a few. So Diane, if you're ready, I'll now hand over to you.
So, hello everyone. Oh, that's quite an introduction. I feel far more important than I actually am. Hello everyone. I'm Diane. Thanks first for the team at UWS for inviting me today. I'm going to talk about my leadership story and a bit about leading, particularly in a social purpose business. To start with, I wanted to share a graphic with you. So, Emma, if you wouldn't mind giving me the next slide. I like it because it visually, for me, sums up what purpose is and what it means to me. So passion, mission, and vocation, a profession, they all combine together to create something that you love doing, and something that the world needs in some way, something that you can actually get paid to do as well, which is important, and your knowledge and skills help you to be great at doing it. There's also a little bit of magic where all of these elements kind of come together to give purpose to what you're doing. And for me, purpose is a kind of, it's like a fuel and clarity to how you want to spend your time, simply, and actually who you want to spend your time with. Um, I became a social entrepreneur. Now, you can make a reasonably decent living out of this, but it's not a personal get rich quick plan that's often associated with kind of traditional entrepreneurship. In my work, I'm interested in building social capital and addressing social injustice. So, if I can have the next slide, Emma. Why social purpose? So what's my story? Why have I particularly gravitated towards that? Well, there's always a backstory. I grew up in a small industrial town in northwest England. I had working class parents. Money was always kind of a great source of trouble in our house. And it ultimately led to a situation where family life broke down. And at 18, I found myself becoming a parent to my younger brother in social housing. And I had to work out fast how I was going to pay the bills by myself, with very few places that I had to turn for help. So I had to pick myself up, I had to get on with things, finding an apprentice office job in a manufacturing business, studying for qualifications at night. Full time education kind of went out of the window for me, and actually being quite lucky to have a sponsor in my work life. Eventually, life changed. My brother started his own path in life, and over the following 15 years, by moving roles and building experience, I became a senior executive in commercial manufacturing. That financial stability that I'd strive for, it had arrived. I was a homeowner, I was working very hard, but I felt secure. Now, this kind of period of my working life would turn out to be hugely valuable in working my way through the ranks, in a breadth of roles, both financial and operational, and it built my commercial knowledge and acumen. However, it also exposed me to seeing, lots of examples of bad business practice. And it was the late 80s and 90s where the alpha working culture was absolutely in full swing. The pressure to adopt stereotypical masculine qualities was absolutely there. Be competitive, risk taking, logical, single minded, have a myopic focus. It was sometimes intimidating to challenge this in my early career, because when that's all you're surrounded by and it's endorsed as the company culture, it's really quite challenging. And some of the alpha traits are actually more useful in some situations. But why couldn't I also use more feminine traits like collaboration, intuition, resilience, empathy, and compassion? These actually in that situation felt quite devalued at times. And there's absolutely so many times throughout my career, um, I've been judged and challenged in my own communication and leadership style. Yeah, sometimes it's been valid and advice has been given and heeded, but sometimes not actually, where it was really important for me to listen to my gut. More recently, it's more widely discussed how emotional intelligence is an equally important part of those qualities of successful leadership. For me, I think the skill is combining the best of all the traits and tailoring them to each situation. The the grounding that I had from grassroots to senior leadership in the commercial sector, it was a really valuable toolbox that I've been able to draw on at various points since. I also, had the opportunity to work with and learn from some absolutely brilliant people and just so many interesting projects to work on too. Towards the end of my time in the commercial sector, I got married, I had a family, and decided on seeking a different opportunity that created a better work life balance for me personally at that time. So in the early 2000s, through local networks, I found Moneyline, a small not-for-profit startup based in Lancashire. At that time, they had 3 staff and one small shop, and they were helping low-income families who were financially excluded from mainstream banks. So I kind of had some lived experience of what it was like for money to be a real source of stress and worry. And I was just totally amazed by the work that was being done there with just so few resources, and really motivated to get involved to work with the founder and use some of the skills that I'd got from the commercial sector to help them with a kind of, at that time, a localized growth plan. Next slide, please. So, Moneyline. It opened its first shop in 2002 in Blackburn, Lancashire. You'll spot the accent. It was funded by the local council to provide an alternative to illegal money lending that was growing in the local areas of social housing estates that were in the town. The founder, I wasn't the founder, the founder came from a background in the banking sector, and most recently, he'd been running another local credit union. My role at that time was to help plan rolling out the model in other nearby towns. Over the next kind of 5 to 6 years, the branch footprint grew across the northwest. Free funding became available from central government to expand the service. Political interest at that time was growing in addressing financial exclusion and financial deprivation under the then Labour government. And this funding that we got, it led to further expansion into other regions within England and Wales until a change in government in 2010 triggered a wind down of the fund. By this time, Moneyline had developed a fairly decent reputation actually for and some understanding of how to deliver credit and savings to those financially excluded customers and how to scale the geographical model. We had quite disparate geographical growth that had been led by those funding contracts. The operations were quite basic and quickly put together, but it was mostly consistent across the locations. I think, however, the culture and the communication was more or less unique to every location that we'd opened. As the key source of funding wound down, the organisation began seeking alternative sources of funding for growth. By this time, I'd taken on a more formal financial and operations role, and that was really to work on the next phase of the organisation's growth. Over the next couple of years, the organisation also secured debt investment from the newly formed social investment space, and that was kind of born out of David Cameron's Big Society Capital. And although it was social investment, for the first time for the organisation, it was repayable debt that was secured against our lending book, and actually with near commercial rates of interest. Social investment, really, up until this point, consisted of long established, mostly grant making foundations, and the intermediaries that were created to distribute funds for big size capital were set up and managed by people mostly from investment banking backgrounds. So there was quite a bit of ground to cover in the early years when pitching for investment, particularly the understanding of the value of social impact returns as well as financial returns. Around this time, regulatory scrutiny of the lending sector also increased due to growing bad practice from a number of what I now go down as in history as mythical commercial lenders. It was a boom time for the payday loan market too. So it was the era of Wonga and others. It was important for both for-profit and not-for-profit organisations to demonstrate they were delivering appropriate outcomes for the customers that they were serving. Both of these kind of external factors, the investment and the regulatory scrutiny, required the organisation really to quite rapidly increase the professionalisation of the operations because we needed to be both compliant and investment ready. This increased pressure that it created for the leadership as the demands and priorities were changing, ultimately led to the founder CEO stepping down. Next slide, please. So growing pains started really. In 2013, I became the CEO of Moneyline, stepping into a gap left by an incredibly knowledgeable and charismatic founder CEO. It was very much a hello imposter syndrome moment for sure. It can be really hard taking over from a founder, harder sometimes when you've had a previous role within the organization. Okay, you have the advantage of the ready made knowledge, but then you also have the disadvantage of ready made opinions about who you are based on your old role. There is definitely a period of reinvention in your new role to go through. It was a really challenging time for the business. It had grown to a reasonable size compared to the other community finance organisations that there were around the UK, but it was still like minuscule in terms of the size of the market overall for credit and savings products. The systems and processes and skill sets in the business, they were all really seriously creaking and not fit for purpose. We had small teams of people that had been used to working really autonomously in each of those locations with all the different cultures. And whilst that suited them, it didn't really lend itself to an increasingly regulated organisation and the checks and balances that needed to be done on process that were now required to evidence to the financial regulator. It required a lot of change from both an operational and a cultural perspective, and actually the buy-in of staff to make the changes. At the same time, there was also a financial urgency. Without the subsidy of the free funding that had come from the government for running costs and capital, the business had begun losing money. I mean, and so what? We're not for profit, right? But the issue was the income from activities was no longer covering the cost of delivery. So it was eating into the cash reserves that we'd just got from debt investments that were supposed to be supporting future growth. This urgency led me to making, a big mistake of just speeding up the pace of change and not really paying as much attention as I should have to getting the buy-in from key staff. In my head, I was just working hard to fix as much as I could as fast as I could. This wasn't helped by having a small group of staff who'd adopted, a set of working practices that were not in the best interest of the organisation. And by now, we're in the throes of kind of stoking up a rebellion against the changes. Um, I had a plan. I was working harder than I ever had. I was really angry at the detractors for disrupting, but the truth was, I'd not effectively communicated the plans and the impact of the changes that we were making. I was running ahead without even checking behind me. Is anyone following? So, it was a real deep breath, step back moment where I had to decide on either ego, let me carry on regardless, or humility, counselling me to stop and kind of look harder at the plan and rethink the best way to communicate it to all of our stakeholders, not just our staff teams. It was a pretty lonely time. The fear of failure was just creeping in rapidly, and I was also trying to do my previous role plus the CEO role. So really, my first priority is I needed to create some space. So was finding a good CFO stroke COO to join the team and run operations while I could work a bit more closely on the strategy. We were lucky. We managed to recruit an experienced person quite quickly, and this allowed me to have someone to collaborate with on both current operations, but also bringing in that new and objective, more external perspective on the future strategy. I kind of look back on this period and I think, well, thank God, thank goodness I decided to stop and reset. I also think that I stopped kind of fighting the old and this need to prove that, I'm the new person running the business and started focusing on building the new. And this next phase had now become about testing the credibility of our plan and finding out what good looked like, and particularly looking at what the most successful companies do. I did quite a bit of research in looking, what does good look like in this space, and how do different companies communicate with stakeholders? And it then, led us to think about our own kind of culture of communication. So we did present the strategy plan to staff teams a few months later. I wanted to do something that brought everyone together, but also created a kind of organisational memory that we could reference in the future, a bit like a beacon. So that over time, I could bring everyone back to this and remind them, why we were rolling out the change, why we were doing what we were doing. So how did I do it? Well, I kind of in 6 weeks planned an event, and we got everyone together in a field in Shropshire, with a kind of festival feel. We called it Money Fest. And rather than taking them through a PowerPoint of what we were going to do, we let them participate in activities where they could discover the new look and feel of Moneyline, where they could learn more about our purpose, the vision, and the impact our work was having, and creating a feeling of how they were individually and collectively part of our plans to deliver for our customers. It was homemade. We had a paddling pool with hook a duck, where you lifted the ducks up and you got a fact about Moneyline on it. So we did all sorts of different kind of fun things. And well, there were no, it's simple, organic, no dry ice and podiums, but it worked, and it became a gravitational point that we could build on and move forward. We then used this tiny bit of communication culture that we created at Moneyfest and started to include group innovation and discovery into our recruitment and training, so that the look and the feel and the clarity of purpose of Moneyline and the co-creation of how we do things, it just became inherent in our processes. So one example would be, we had full day recruitment sessions. We had a mixture of junior and senior roles from different areas of the business involved. They did kind of knowledge, skills, and strength based activities, Lego based building, 15-minute kind of snap interviews. Candidates for the same role would go through some of the process together. The recruitment teams would then give feedback on each activity, and the team would collectively agree who to recruit. So why did we do it that way? I mean, this created buy-in from the team, but it also created a ready-made network for the successful candidate. It's not an easy thing to do, because it breaks with convention a bit. And sometimes candidates for jobs didn't want to participate because they preferred a more traditional interview process. So we kind of had to be okay that people might not like it, and refuse to take part, because if they didn't even try, it was likely that despite, the great skill set that they might have, they wouldn't be a good fit for the organizational culture and the ways of working that we were trying to build. This All of this was a big part of transforming Moneyline's culture and operations into that fit for purpose organization that exists now, that I'm, incredibly proud of what we achieved. We built a consistent, trusted brand. We have tailored customer experiences, 5-star feedback on service. Went on to secure further significant investment for growth. And really, our thought leadership and our learnings have also helped make a positive impact for how financial services works for ordinary low income households who are struggling to get by in the UK. So, having secured the second round of funding, which was about February 20, now we all know what happened in March 20. Our next major pivot point, as it was for many organisations, was the COVID-19 pandemic. And here was the next test of leadership in how to support our people and customers, and how to make sure that our organisation would actually survive through this, when it became clear that it was going to be many months and not many weeks in duration. The business model was still largely delivered via a high street branch footprint with some telephone lending and some initial plans around digital rollout of products and services. Most branches were small and not a COVID safe space for staff and customers to be in. So we pretty quickly furloughed 60% of the workforce for 3 months, and that allowed us to accelerate our telephone and digital rollout. For the other 40% of staff, we rapidly set up virtual working and a customer care team to contact most of our vulnerable customers. It was really, again, a time when it was really important to manage communication with both groups of staff, those that were furloughed and those that were still working, and talk to them about how this initial course of action would give us the best chance of managing the business and the financial uncertainty that this had created. Forbearance that was important for our existing customers that we had who couldn't pay because of COVID, and managing risk was really important with new customers who had a higher, there was big demand, but there was a real high uncertainty over their income. The small team that we had then ran some really rapid transformation projects. It was amazing to be able to begin to serve all the customers remotely by phone and web. It was phased over 3 months and fully operational with all staff back in work virtually between months 4 and 6, really. We'd successfully rolled out what was an original 24-month plan for digitisation of our services within 3 to 6 months. Um, this time, and what we did, it also led to piloting new systems and product developments over the first year of the pandemic, so that we could meet those like just ever changing needs of customers. And we put in a permanent pattern of hybrid working where we could actually, to sunny Lancashire, bring in all the skills we needed remotely from anywhere and connect virtually with those new people joining the team. And I could certainly draw on my early learnings and mistakes and experience a rapid change in keeping those channels of communication open constantly so that teams at various stages of the transition into the various new ways of working that we were rolling out felt involved and just part of the solution. We also made sure that, and I know lots of businesses have talked about this over the kind of COVID period, we kept well-being as a priority. As staff were not only going through their own issues with COVID, but many were listening to the experiences of our customers, and they really needed to kind of decompress from that too. I think what I would say is the burden and the kind of weight of responsibility of keeping things going felt huge as a leader, and managing the expectations of staff, investors, other stakeholders who in times of crisis like look to the leadership of the organization to provide them with that reassurance that you know what you're doing. It was really important to be honest about any key challenges and be, no matter how hard that was, and be honest about the plans, about needing to be flexible, that things were going to, it's a massively changing external environment. We sometimes didn't know what was happening from one week to the next. And to be able to, people understand that was, we needed to be flexible and respond to that constantly changing environment. And this helped to build trust as that external situation unfolded. It was so important to find that like inner resilience that reminds you to kind of control the things you can and not focus on the things that you immediately cannot control. And actually, that as an individual, you, even though it felt like it sometimes, you are not singly responsible for the success or failure of the business in such an extreme situation. And although it felt, and it always feels like there's not a second to spare, really important to try and just step back and take time out just to take care of yourself and have a break away from thinking about it 24/7, because there'll always be something to work on, and making demands on your time. Now, I haven't always followed my own advice for sure, but I am definitely more selfish now about how I spend my time to rest and recover. So, the cost of living crisis. We work our way through COVID, and the cost of living crisis is the next layer of additional challenge. It's affecting everyone, but it will particularly impact the households that Moneyline sees, that are in financially vulnerable circumstances. More families are living in poverty, and there remains so much more work to do to build resilience and well-being for people, but also financial systems that work for everyone, and are inclusive. And there I can take a breath and say, could I have another slide, please? So, leadership. What has all of that taught me about leadership? I've learned very often the hard way, that it's equally rewarding and frustrating. Not for profit and purpose driven business, it really doesn't mean that you get a whole pass on needing to have a business model that stacks up financially and a business model that's investable. No business equals no impact for us. So, strategic leadership and looking ahead is as important as trying to just deliver what's needed today. Leadership challenges, they're common across many sectors and many sizes of business, whether you're not for profit or not. I've lost count, though, of the number of times where I've heard the words, it's business during my working life, or it ain't personal, or don't get emotional. I think work is personal. Why? Because I think it helps us create a sense of progress and accomplishment and community. That those three things that can actually like fuel our self-esteem, happiness, confidence. I'm okay actually with bringing the real me to work. Yeah, sometimes maintaining composure is important, but being human and being flawed some of the time, like trying to speak about things like this, I'm okay with that. Um, Keep your sense of humour. I've definitely always kept my sense of humour. Work serious, of course it is, but you're always going to need to laugh off a whole heap of ridiculous stuff too, which is part of that kind of being very self-aware. Try and understand where your true values are, and do your very best to follow them. I've always tried to keep a very open and curious mind. Because I'll tell you now, there's no one wants that someone sat in the corner of the office saying they've seen and they know it all. You can learn from people from all walks of life, both inside and outside of your business. But there's a real, also value and wisdom in your own experience that you've got, as long as you use it kind of quite gently and carefully. And I've had the opportunity to kind of learn from a few people on how to do that better. Letting go of responsibility. You definitely don't have to do it all. And that's been something that I've often struggled with. And don't ever be filled that no one can do what you do, because you've got to trust others and you've got to delegate. And I think also knowing your stuff, though, you might trust others and delegate and let them get on with what they're doing, but knowing your stuff that is within your own remit, and being a subject matter expert is also important, though. Being able to connect with people, different ways of communicating, really important skill. It can just be as simple as being able to be uh, just giving the simple facts with absolute clarity and authority. Or it can be turning information into impactful stories that bring those deeper insights and understanding about a situation, or what makes something work or tick, or someone tick. Um, it can be a lonely business. So I think, I've tried to forge as many relationships as I can with other senior leaders, so that I can share challenges and ideas, and that particularly can help you keep really good perspective on your own situation. And talking with other female entrepreneurs and leaders, it can help build your confidence actually. It could, because it just gives you that reality check on your capabilities and achievements when you might be looking over your shoulder and imposter syndrome is creeping in. And it's really important actually to feel like you're not bragging by simply owning your own accomplishments. The other thing I've definitely learned to do is cope with fear of failure, because it's highly likely that you'll fail several times at several things over the course of your career, and I certainly have. And failure is actually a real possibility in any business venture. You know, you're going to have mishaps, losses, mistakes, but they all teach you something. And as long as you learn from them and try not to make them again, and don't give up, really, because resilience, staying focused on a goal and picking yourself up and keeping going. But if keeping going on the same thing isn't working for you, then pivot to something new, do something different. And then definitely take in all the feedback, but definitely filter out the noise. Just this morning, I saw, let me look at my notes. I saw a news post that Bevis Watts, the CEO of Triodos Bank. So he's a kind of Triodos, and under his leadership, they're a leading expert in sustainable banking. And Bevis has just received an honorary degree from the University of the West of England, so UWE, not UWS, rivals. And in accepting this, he said the following, and I really like it. Kind human beings and inclusive leaders are what I believe will define the most successful organisations of the future. If I could have the last slide, please. I'm nearly done. So, another big part of what I think is maturity in leadership, and it's right where I am right now, is recognizing when it's time to do something different, and you're no longer adding the right kind of value to the organization you're in for the stage of development it's reached. So I left my CEO role at Moneyline to spend more time with family again, definitely. And at this stage in my career, I could see a different opportunity for me to use my skills and knowledge. So during the last 10 years, we covered it a little bit in the intro, but I've been able to have some involvement in the policy environment that helps shape the wider financial inclusion agenda. And I'm looking forward now in this next kind of stage of my career in working in a different leadership role. It's where I'll be part of a wider group that is working on systemic change within financial systems and making them work, even making them work properly for everyone who lives in the UK and is in the system in some way. I honestly don't see my working life as heading to a door that will close at retirement age. I see it as kind of part of my life that will continue in different roles and phases for as long as I want it to, actually. And while I've still got the right work-life balance that can support me financially and support me emotionally. So that's my story. And thank you very much for your time and for listening today.
So thanks, Dan, for sharing your story with us. There's lots to think about there, and we'll definitely pick up on some of your points in the Q&A. So now it's time to introduce our second speaker, Angela Morrison. Now, in 2013, Angela found herself in a career that she describes as stifling, demotivating, and frustrating. And having just turned 30, she decided to take a huge risk and set up her own business. With no experience, no startup capital, and in her own words, no idea of what she was doing, she spent the next 10 years building businesses in multiple international locations, working with startups and entrepreneurs from all over the globe and connecting Middle East-based venture capital equity with innovative high-growth businesses. She developed a passion for inspiring others to build their own businesses and also became a fierce advocate for female-led investment in grassroots entrepreneurship. Finally, back in Scotland after a few years spent abroad, Angela now has a role within UWS, but she still runs her own business focusing on writing, advising, and consulting for international wealth management companies. And Angela will be speaking to us today about many things, including how to redefine failure in order to discover success. So Angela, if you're ready, it's over to you.
Hi, I'm ready. Thank you very much, Alan. It is so great to be here. And thank you, Diane. I've really genuinely enjoyed your talk. It's big shoes to fill, and I hope I can do so. I'm here today to tell you a bit about my story. My name is Angela, and as Alan said, for the last 10 years, I have been building businesses. I've worked abroad, I've worked here, I have been in many different industries, and I've gained many different experiences. And I'm very excited about the opportunity to sit here and tell you about it. Now, I have called the talk Lessons in Resilience from a Decade of International Entrepreneurship. And one thing you're going to learn from this talk, hopefully, is how to use fancy words to say simple things. I'm going to tell you about how I messed up a few times and probably how I failed and how I plan to get back up and how it is a journey. And I hope from me telling you my experiences, it will probably set you up for your own journey ahead. So let's get started with the first one. Emma, could you pop up the first slide? So we're going to talk about resilience today, and I have sectioned resilience into 3 distinct areas. And if you're sitting thinking to yourself, but Angela, I didn't know there was 3 areas of resilience, neither did I. So first of all, let's look at financial resilience. Now, I'm assuming most people listening to this talk are in business school or studying towards your degree, or perhaps you've finished university and you're setting up your own business, or perhaps you're one of my friends who I spammed the link to in the hope that somebody would hear me shouting into the void. So whatever you're doing here, I'm pretty sure you've heard the good old advice for businesses, which is don't lose money. That's basically it. I think that's what they teach you on day 1 of every business school across the world. Don't lose money. So now I'm going to tell you about how I lost a lot of money. I started my first business in 2013, and as Alan helpfully said, I didn't have a clue what I was doing. That was not my own words. That was very rude. I was feeling unfulfilled in my career, and to be honest, that wasn't anybody else's fault but my own. What I've definitely learned is when you have feelings of unfulfillment and you feel demotivated, that usually says more about you than the position that you're in. I decided I needed a change. I needed something different. And I honestly did not know what that was going to be. You may find yourself in a situation, or maybe you're even feeling it just now. You come up to a crossroads, but you don't even know what each direction leads to. I knew I had a safe job, I knew I had a salary, I knew that I had a regular income, and I knew that I didn't want that. So I started thinking about, well, what do I have control over? Diane mentioned a very important part in her talk, which was about you can't control everything, but you can control some things. And one of the things you can control is your daily routine. Now, I know we've all seen these hustle culture videos about, Mark Wahlberg waking up at 2:30 a.m. Don't worry, I didn't do that. But I do think there's something to be said for having some consistency and some routine and some ownership in your day. So I started waking up earlier. I started consuming different content. I used to love nothing more than a reality TV show. This was in the days before Love Island. I do still like a bit of Love Island, but I started listening to podcasts. I started just listening to conversations from people who'd had different experiences than me. And what I appreciated most about these stories was that they had been through the tough times and then come out on top. Now, when we hear stories like that, we realise that the tough times are a plot point. It's just a chapter, it's a footnote. but when we experience them in our own lives, it doesn't feel like a plot point. It feels like literally the end of the world. So as I was starting to hear these stories, I was thinking, okay, now I've learned from the best. I've listened to all of these podcasts. I've read all these books. Failure's not going to come from me. I know what I'm doing. So I started my first business. My first business was in property. I didn't have any startup capital, but to be honest, I think for most businesses, you don't need it. Me and Alan actually had a very constructive conversation earlier about the difference between setting up a business in Scotland and setting up a business abroad. And there really is this culture of venture capital in places like Dubai and Silicon Valley that we don't have here. And I always thought that that was a negative. And to be honest, I don't think it is. We are more able to build sustainable, community-driven, functional, for-purpose businesses here, and overheads are much lower than in most other developed countries. So I do think that you can start a very successful, very good business here with no money. The business grew rapidly, I think probably mostly down to me pushing it. You know, you can get a lot of momentum behind something, you can work every hour God sends, but there is a natural rate that things should grow at. And sometimes what happens is, Diane hit the nail on the head, ego can get in the way. We want to grow faster than everybody else. We want to grow faster than what is possible. And it just grew too fast. I had offices and staff members, and we were hitting 7 figures by the time I still didn't even know, how it happened and where it came from. It felt like overnight. In reality, it was only about 2.5 years, which to anybody who's run a business is literally overnight. So I was expanding into all different locations, and part of that was being a bit of people pleasing as well. I was getting invitations from lots of different markets and from lots of different organizations who thought, hey, here's a business, we would really like to help you. And another life tip is if somebody comes to you and offers you an opportunity that's going to help you, it's really going to help them. So just be careful of all the opportunities that you're considering. It's okay to say no, and in fact, the more times that you say no, the more things that you can then say yes to in a structured way. So it grew rapidly, and I lost control, and I ended up in 2017 back to the start, now with no business, but this time I was in Kuwait. So first time I started a business, I was in Paisley. Now I was having to do it again from Kuwait. So what did I learn from these 2.5 years of my life? Well, it sounds so basic, but I learned the importance of an emergency fund. I now, weirdly enough, teach people about financial responsibility in their business and in their personal lives, which anybody who's ever been on a night out with me and saw how much, I spend on ridiculous things cannot quite believe that I do. But there is a real importance in just having a safety net. I think it's important to dream big. I think it's great to have huge aspirations, but it's much easier to do so from a relative level of comfort. You really don't want to risk things and then end up with less than you had before. It's okay to make sure that your feet are cleared before you set up a business. I would never advise anybody getting into business with personal debt. But honestly, it's completely up to yourself. Every situation is different, but I think it's all about finding a business strategy that works for you, but make sure you take care of your personal finance first. And then the other part of that is keep your business model completely lean and simple. I have personally set up, and I've also worked with a huge variety of business models. I have seen businesses that have 7 to 8 figure incomes that are not profitable at all. And in fact, that's a very popular business model nowadays. The tech boom of Silicon Valley, none of them were making revenue. It was mostly just based on the valuation of a business, which was based on users, potential users, and, daily hits. You really want to have a business which is based on actual revenue. It's much less stressful, and it's much easier to explain to the accountants. Know your margins. You might be making revenue of $1 million a year. Your margins might be 2.5%. So it's all about how much profit you're making in the business. And again, that's about making sure that you have a business which is suitable for you. We will talk in the next part about different models like freelancing and self-employment. And I think in a post-COVID landscape, we're more open to the possibility that businesses don't look like they used to look. Anybody who took out an office lease in January 2020 will probably have a few life lessons about business, now. So we really have to look at what infrastructure we need and what we can really reduce from the business model, and how we can make it work for ourselves. And part of that is build solid financial foundations before expanding. That doesn't mean you have to run out and take money. It doesn't mean you have to be completely profitable. It's okay for businesses to not make profit in the first few years as they're expanding, but you have to have financial resilience in the sense of knowing that your business model is solid, that you've tested it in a relatively small area, and then you can start to expand on that. Okay, Emma, can I have the next slide, please? So the second one is operational resilience. What you'll find as we go through these stories, although they are in chronological order, financial resilience is the sort of basics. Operational resilience, this is very fluid. And the third one, well, we'll cover that when I get to it. This is basically about the journey that I took between what I thought an entrepreneur was and actually what I believe now I know what an entrepreneur to be. So I was in Kuwait after the failure of my business. And the sole reason that I wasn't jumping on a plane to come home is ego. Again, amazed that it was mentioned in Diane's talk as well. Looking now with hindsight and a nice 10,000 feet view of the situation, I couldn't go home and say that I had failed. Everybody believed in me so much when I set up this business. Everybody supported me so hard. And I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. I did not want to admit that I had lost control. So I stayed in Kuwait and I started again. Now, the difference was this time I had connections. And if there's one, bit of advice that I could give of what you can do before setting up a business is make sure you build your network. A good network of well-connected people will see you through whatever it is that you want to do in life. And you can build a network really easily now with, a lot of digital connectivity, with being able to get in touch with mentors. You can learn from people that you would never have had access to before the internet. You can watch talks of some of the greatest minds in the world talking about what they do. But there's really nothing more valuable than making actual in real life connections with people in your local market. So I had made connections with some Kuwaiti investors, which is, let's be honest, always good to have. And I tried to think about what I could bring to the table. Here I was, a single blonde female from the UK, unmarried in Kuwait, and I was trying to get them to come to the boardroom table with me and make deals. So I knew what I was bringing had to be important. And I started to think about how Kuwaiti money integrated with international entrepreneurship. And there was a little bit of a cultural barrier. It was hard for companies in America and the UK and Europe to imagine themselves aligning their business with a market like Kuwait. One, they didn't know much about it. And two, nobody from Kuwait is jumping on a plane to come to local trade exhibitions in Paisley. So I thought, well, what if I could provide that face of Kuwaiti venture capital for European and US businesses? And I remember drawing up this business plan, like literally on the back of a napkin. I mean, when people say that, I was in Starbucks and I asked them for some paper. So it was pretty much on the back of Starbucks paper. And then within a week, I was sitting in front of three of the biggest Kuwaiti venture funds, and I put it to them that if they simply paid for my travel and covered all my hotel expenses and gave me a little bit of money to spend each day, I would go out and find them the best technology companies in the world. And I did. So that then started my journey of becoming what I think you now term as a digital nomad. At the time, I didn't know I was a digital nomad. I just knew that I had a lot of Marriott points. I was able to fly to different locations. I would be on sometimes 6 to 8 flights a month. It was honestly one of the best times of my life. but at the same time, it was absolutely like stress inducing. It was waking up in a place that you didn't even know where you were. But I felt as if I was doing it because I knew that there was a goal in mind. And I think when you're building something that you believe in and you're overcoming failure and you've got the carrot in the end of the stick and you can see yourself getting somewhere, you will endure anything. Like the passion that you can put behind something when you really put your mind to it. I'm pretty sure I survived on almost zero sleep for a couple of years. So that was eye-opening. And also I knew that in order to connect with these companies that I was sitting in front of, I had to know a bit about what they were doing. I had never been particularly technical before, so I signed up for some online courses and things like fintech, payments and processes, blockchain, cryptography. I started to learn a little bit about what the latest AI companies were doing, what's the newest thing in machine learning, so that I was going into these conferences and I could understand at least enough to open a conversation. It was one of the biggest growth journeys in terms of my own learning and development. And I met some fantastic people that I'm still in touch with to this day. That's basically been then the kind of foundation for the way that I work now as an entrepreneur, because nobody at these international tech conferences has an office. Nobody has 5 staff working for them. They've got a virtual assistant which is based in a different location from them. You really learn a lot about how entrepreneurship is almost solely about yourself at some times. And then if you want to build something bigger than that, you can, but there's almost no need to. So as I was going with the freelance model of entrepreneurship, I decided to settle back in Dubai for a little while. I'd found some great companies for the Kuwaiti Venture Fund, but I knew that I wanted to get involved in more than just that. I didn't just want to be the broker of deals, which would help companies succeed. I wanted to also be part coach, part mentor, and be working with these companies and help them overcome some of the same challenges that I faced, which is working in different markets is hard. Making connections is hard, assimilating yourself, building a team is hard. So I was based in Dubai. And I made connections with the Dubai government and a program that they had out there, which was called Dubai Future Accelerators. Now, this was, just like everything in Dubai. It was big, it was amazing, it was well funded, and it was just a fantastic opportunity to really learn what entrepreneurship would be like if money was no object. And what Dubai wanted was they had outlined several strategy issues that they were having as a country, as a region, and they wanted entrepreneurs from all over the world to come in and work together to solve those problems. So this was the first time that I became aware of just how important it is to connect with a larger strategy, whether it's an organizational strategy, whether it's a government focus. But if you can build a business that aligns with something that a large presence is doing, you're always going to get on fine. And Dubai were prepared to put their money where their mouth was. So they were saying to these companies, if you come, we will give you accommodation, we'll put you up, we'll give you a space to work. If you win a competition, it would be like a 6-week, I think it was. And if your project is chosen, we'll pay for you to then stay another year. During this time, you will meet investors. So all of the promises that we're saying, they absolutely delivered on. For the companies who I brought over, it was one of the most life-changing events that they could have done as entrepreneurs. And it really got me thinking about the importance of facilitating connections for people, especially in tech companies. Because just because you can build a business yourself, it doesn't mean you should or you want to. Loneliness is a very real problem of founders. Diane touched on it as well. You really do feel sometimes like you're fighting the world. And it's hard for people in your life to understand what you're going through. It's very first world problems, and it's very hard to get people to give you real insights or real advice. You need to get around people who have been there, who have done that. And that was one of the things that I loved about Dubai, just being able to create that facility for people to have those conversations. So what is the lessons from this? Apart from I sound like a literal tour guide for Dubai, you should definitely go, but it really is all about who you know. And I know that you're told this, and I know there is parts of a business that you really have to be sitting in a dark room just coding or just working on your business plan. But you have to make sure you're taking time to lift your head up from your computer and get out and meet people. UWS in particular, I've found, is a great place for meeting amazing people. I mean, I've been based here for a couple of months now and able to work from here, and some of the people I have met have just been absolutely, amazing. So get yourself into a place, even if you're going to a coffee shop to work from, go to a coffee shop that is not on your usual street. Go up to the West End or go to the Merchant City, or, if you're in Edinburgh, go somewhere where people that you want to be around, that you want to learn from, that would inspire you, are having coffee. And then the other thing is networking should be your biggest time spent, and also probably your biggest spend. I loved a bit of networking. Now, networking sometimes came with champagne, so I'm not sure if I loved the networking or I loved the champagne, but I'm pretty sure it was the networking. But it really is the best way. There's nothing better than getting to know people and then seeing them at different points around the journey. The international conference circuit for technology businesses is surprisingly small. And I would love nothing more than traveling to somewhere like Seoul in Korea and seeing somebody that I met at a conference in Los Angeles and who I was able to help connect with somebody in Dubai. And these are the conversations and the connections that really can only come from face to face. So if you can get yourself out there, I always think there's a big thing to be said for traveling. Even travel on your own, get an Airbnb in Zug in Switzerland and work from a coffee shop where, tech people are there building businesses. Whatever it is that you think, I can't do that, or that feels a bit uncomfortable, just go and do that. And I think that will be the key to kind of opening you up to new connections. And then always try and be of service. The biggest thing that I learned about networking is stop telling people what you do and find out what they do. Nobody goes to a networking event because they need a paper supplier or because they need a business coach. But weirdly enough, it's paper suppliers and business coaches that you find at networking events. And I understand we all need to eat, we all need to pay the bills, but that's not what it's about. There was a very great, a good business book from a maybe problematic entrepreneur, Gary Vaynerchuk, which was released a couple of years ago, which is hustle culture, but I think the message holds true. And it's called Jab, 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 Right Hook. And it's basically the way you should approach a new connection is give, 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 and then you can ask for something if you need it. So find people who you can be of help to, work out what it is they need. And if you can do it, and have no expectation of getting anything in return. And what you'll slowly do is you'll build up a network of people who believe in what you're doing, who are happy to help you. And then that just brings along the right type of networking karma, will we call it? Is that a thing? The right type of karma to help them with your next connections for who you need. So I think that's us covered this. We're going to go into the next part. I do warn you, I'm not sure if I'm going to cry during this slide. This is something I've only spoke about in therapy so far, so you're really in for a treat. I've called this one Entrepreneurial Resilience. And again, when you see a fancy name, it's basically about now how I failed at life. So we've had financial failure, we've had operational and strategic failure, and now we have just basically life failure. During the years of Dubai, I was stranded initially, during the years of COVID, I was stranded initially in Dubai. It was extremely stressful trying to go home from that. But again, first world problems. Does anybody feel sorry for me? No, it's totally fine. And when I finally got home in November 2021, I was so determined to put the whole entrepreneurial experience behind me. I was so done with that part of my life, just temporarily. I knew I needed a little break. I knew I needed something that was going to keep me grounded in the UK. So I got a dog. I got a really big dog. I got a really big rescued dog. And within about 48 hours of having that dog, I was rushed by ambulance to hospital because it attacked me. So this is a part of the story that they definitely don't tell you about in business school, that life is going to come at you, and it's going to come at you hard. And it does it to all of us. It does it whether you build businesses or whether you don't build businesses. But I think what really caught me out was the feeling that I've already been through so much. Surely this can't be something else on top of it. So it really completely knocked me off my feet. The physical recovery was only made worse by the psychological recovery. And I was diagnosed with acute post-traumatic stress disorder, for which for anybody who has been through something similar, it's absolutely horrific. And if there's one surefire thing that you can say changed, it was, it basically took away everything that hadn't already been lost. So I had been through bankruptcy, well, near bankruptcy. I had been through losing everything materially. I'd been through losing friends, family. I'd been through losing connections, lost the business. But nothing compares to actually losing the sense of yourself that believed that you were capable of being an entrepreneur in the first place. And that went along with my ability to leave the house for 3 months. I couldn't write with my hand. I could hardly wash myself. I had to relearn social skills. I had to relearn how to walk into a coffee shop and order without having an actual panic attack, thinking that somebody was, going to come out of the shadows and attack me. So what does this have to do with business, you might be asking? Well, I think that what it does is it shows that when life takes anything from you, whatever it is, it takes away, there will always be those situations that come up. We will always have traumatic events. And I learned about this concept now of post-traumatic growth and recovery. And I know that that's the stage I'm in now. 18 months after the attack, I'm finally back in a business environment. This is the first time I have delivered a talk to more than just my bathroom mirror, which is my weekly Oscar speech that I give in the mirror, just in case. And it really feels good. It feels good to be back. I feel completely changed from the incident. And when I was doing up the slides for today, for sake of evenness and consistency, I had to put a section in here which is called lessons. So what can I teach you about recovery? Really nothing. I mean, you can never plan for life's lessons. But if I've learned anything, it's that the human spirit and the desire to survive and thrive as humans is stronger than any trauma. I really do feel like there's a reason I was given this challenge. I think there's a reason that I was given something which took away everything that I took for granted. My ability to walk into a room with confidence, my ability to connect with strangers, my ability to exist in the world and to be a force for good. And I think that everything I had been through with my businesses had prepared me by building mental and emotional toughness. And you can build this resilience in your life without having to wait for a traumatic event. In fact, please don't. Do small things that are uncomfortable. Make changes to your daily routine. Something as small as only watching one episode in a Netflix series. Anything that your brain goes, I want to do that, and you go, no, we're not doing that. It builds up those emotional, mental, and psychological muscles that you just know you can do tough things. You can do things that you don't want to do. I've learned that resilience is a journey. It's not a destination. It's certainly not a tick box on an application form for life. And weirdly enough, if you were to ask me 5 years ago, what is my one business advice? It would have been think big or hustle or work harder. And now it's just be kind. I genuinely think I have learned more and I've gained more from my experiences over the last few years by just being aware that everybody is fighting a battle that you cannot see. We're all in this together. We've all just come out of a life-changing pandemic. We can build businesses without tearing everybody else down. And that's particularly important for women in business. So thank you for being here to listen to my first talk back. I really enjoyed speaking to you. Thank you for the free therapy at UWS. If you want to send me the bill for this, I'll be happy to. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela, for being so honest and open about your own experience. No doubt we'll be delighted to get you back in to speak to some of our students, some of our enterprise modules as well. You're making a lot of the same points that we would make in our teaching, and it's interesting. There's a lot of common themes between your presentation and Diane's story. So now we're in the home straight, and we're going to move to the Q&A section of the event. And for this part, I'll be handing over to my colleague Patrick from the enterprise team, who's been patiently collating the questions which you'll put to the speakers. And for this section, all of our mics will be on, so any of the four of us can just chip in if they want to add anything or develop any of the points. So Patrick, if you're ready, it's over to you.
Hi, hopefully everybody can hear me. Give me a thumbs up, that's great. Thanks to Diane and both Angela, that was really inspirational stories from both of you. You touch a lot of those things, you know, on both events, and collecting these questions, I'd be saying to the panel, don't shoot the messenger. So Diane, first of all, I'd be saying to you is, you know, and then same question to Angela, but Diane first, what's the most valuable piece of advice you would give anybody thinking of pursuing a career like your own?
Don't take yourself too seriously. I think you know, just one day at a time and roll with the punches and learn as you go, and don't put yourself under too much pressure to be too good at everything right away. You know, be on your own learning and be curious. I think that's lots of pieces. You know, it's not one piece of advice, but I'd say be curious about everything and everybody when you're at the early part of discovering and setting something up.
Yeah, I mean,
Thank you for that. Certainly, you know, along those lines, I think I beat myself up all the time as a project manager. That's what I do as a living, and take everything really seriously, and everything functional, and everything has to be delivered. And you know, I get really stressed out. You know, I can really empathise with what you're saying there. Great advice. And Angela, what would you say?
Well, I think Diane just ticked off most of my list, but I agree with everything you've said. I always like to defer to little bits of advice that I've heard that sort of kept me going. Yeah. One of the recent ones I heard was an actor I really like was interviewed, and he was asked, what's the best piece of advice you had? And he said when he got into acting, somebody told him, don't do it unless you have to. Like, unless you really have to, unless you have no other option, don't put yourself through it. And I think that might be the advice, but that doesn't mean you can't be an entrepreneur. I think we can exhibit entrepreneurial qualities without having to go out there and start our own businesses. You can be an entrepreneur in an organisation. You can take more accountability in your daily life. But when it comes to jumping on a plane to New York with $100 in your pocket, don't do it unless you really, really have to, okay? Stay safe.
Absolutely, it's fantastic. And again, staying with you, Angela, there, what would you feel is the greatest challenge facing women today in the world of business?
Facing women in particular? I think, to be honest, personally, I think there has been a little bit of perhaps an overcorrection that I'm seeing in terms of a rush to get women into positions on boards and in senior positions without actually fundamentally understanding why it is important to have them there. I don't think that diversity hiring is a tick box exercise, and actually I think one of the biggest challenges facing women is it's still an uneven playing field because we only recently have started to take equality seriously, and you're talking about careers that span 40 to 50 to 60 years. Also, female startups are notoriously underfunded compared to male startups, but I also think that might be because we're better at not spending money. So maybe we need less money, but these are bigger macro problems that I think have to be addressed by the people in boardrooms making those decisions. Personally, as a female entrepreneur, I think it's all about considering being female as an advantage and trying to really find the areas where that works for you. And Diane really touched on some important ones, which is, it's the empathy, it's the traits that we have that are so valuable, and focus on those. And I think grow in that direction instead of sitting at home worrying about closed doors. I don't know if that's inspirational, sorry.
No, absolutely. And Diane,
No, it is.
just I know that Angela covered a bit there that you previously mentioned. Was there anything you'd like to add there about what do you see as the greatest challenge facing women today in the world of business?
Do you know, the systemic challenges are still there. They absolutely are. And, you know, I agree with some of what Angela says around the kind of quotas. I never want to be somewhere just to tick a box, ever. I want to be there for my own accomplishments and merit and merits. But I think barriers, sometimes yourself can be a barrier, in the not it's not humility, but it's owning your own accomplishments and not being afraid to kind of go, you know, being too humble almost. And I think women tend to undervalue themselves a little bit sometimes in conversations, the way they talk about things, less likely to ask for pay increases and different things. So I think it's that just being who you really want to be, and not thinking first about what the preconceptions of you may or may not be. Just owning it and not being afraid to just be a person as opposed to a gender.
Oh, that's absolutely fantastic. It's something that's close to my heart, but it's really come over years of experience. I didn't have it, when I started off, working away, but it's that approach of being honest and being self-reflective, and then actually getting to that line, which you just said, there is being human. So looking at the tasks that I do or the teams that I work in is actually then getting that message across that you all start off as humans in the first place. Thanks for that. I've got one for Alan here, which is one of the messages was there's a lot of ideas that people have, but they don't really know how to execute the ideas. What's the best place to start or proceed in those ideas?
I don't think that's for me, is it? And just
that's what I was asking you, Alan. You know what I mean? Because like from your background there, what you've been doing in the past is having lots of ideas. Is it something to get you your view on it for a pass on to our panel?
Yeah, I mean, I was speaking to Angela earlier on in my previous role when I was a business startup advisor, and I might meet 7 or 8 people a day coming in to set up, to act on their ideas for a business. And I always felt the one thing I couldn't give them was the idea. I think it's quite personal to the individual, as it was for me when I set up and ran my own business. So I think getting the idea is half the battle. I think the big thing, and I tend to say it quite a lot at these sort of events, is that you need to look for and take help. You need to be coachable. You can educate yourself. I think both of the speakers talked about the importance of that. There's lots of ways you can do it. You don't have to go and do formal learning like a degree. Most business people don't do a business degree in terms of that, although they might want to. So the point is there's loads of support out there, and I'm getting a bit of deja vu here because I say it quite a lot. The Enterprise Support Network, particularly in Scotland, is very well developed. Loads of agencies, organisations out there that are more than happy to help. And you will know people like Diane and Angela who are very enterprising, whether it's in the context of running their own business or it's in the context of developing an organisation. And as you've seen just here, they all have that desire to give something back. So go and speak to people who are in your network, or find people that aren't in your network, because that's how you take it from an idea into something of value. That's how you do it.
Yeah.
Find other people and surround yourself with people like that who can help.
I'm just going to say, Diane, would you agree with that? Is that something you're going to add there, just in terms of how they execute the ideas when they have a lot of them?
Yeah, and just keep sharing them with people and test it and be open to critique about it. And you'll be surprised how much people, that have experience want to share their knowledge and get a real, a lot of like satisfaction and kick out within that sort of forum, not being the know-it-all in the corner like I talked about earlier, but just being able to openly kind of talk about stuff and share ideas is really rewarding for the other person who's offering the advice as well.
Yeah, if I could just talk about that, that's actually a really good point. I think people forget when they're asking for advice, they're asking for help. This is not a one-way street. I enjoy helping other businesses because I also know a lot about business from that. So you have a lot of ideas and you're not sure how to execute on them. That's fantastic. What you need to do is get around people who see that as a positive. Certainly when it comes to action, you'll probably have to narrow some of those ideas down because you can't do everything.
Yeah.
So maybe focusing on one. But just the fact that you're having those ideas shows that you're in the mindset to already get started on an entrepreneurial journey. Tell everybody you can that you're thinking about setting up a business. And I absolutely thrive from conversations like that. That's the best part of my day when people talk to me about their business. So it's never a hassle to ask another entrepreneur for advice.
Thanks for that. I've got another question here, which I wouldn't be able to answer myself. And staying with you, Angela, what
Sure.
is the one thing you wished you'd known before starting your career? If somebody asked me that, I think I'd go into a dark room and probably appear the next day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a tough one because I think there's a certain value to not knowing it all at the start. Like I think how you develop and how you grow through the challenges and through the things that happen is a good thing. But if there's one thing that I wish I had known and understood, it's that this is going to sound really terrible, but you have to be a little bit selfish when you're building a business. I started out with these huge aspirations of being a fantastic employer, and I was going to give back to the local community, and I was going to change the world, and I was going to cure climate change, and I was going to pay off my dad's mortgage. Spoiler alert, none of that happened. And actually what happened was by me forgetting about focusing on my own development and my own capacity and capabilities, I actually let the business down. I was blinded by this, perfect vision of a future, which, let's be honest, wasn't going to exist. And I missed ways that I could just have slowly, gradually built a really good, sustainable business. So I think if that was something that somebody could tell me at the start, just take it slowly, take it easy, build something sustainable. And it's definitely not all about the money. In fact, I think entrepreneurship is absolutely nothing to do with money when it comes down to it. But yeah, I think that's it. I wish I could go back. I'd be 30 again.
Yeah, no, fantastic and really honest. And Diane, if one thing you'd put your finger on, you wish you'd known before starting your career.
To get good at one thing first, rather than trying to get good at lots of things at the same time, and be an expert in one thing and build on that, and have the confidence to do that, as opposed to wanting to appear like I'm in charge and better than I actually am. So self-confidence, I think, to be able to narrow it down rather than trying to prove everything to everybody. So realizing I've got nothing to prove.
That's fantastic. And just before I get another question, because the questions are flying in left, right, and centre, I was going to say, Alan, did you have a question you wanted to ask?
Yeah, I mean, it's partly an observation. It was interesting that of the two speakers we've got, deliberately, women in the world of business, one working in an organisation, a leadership role, and one leading in their own business. I was just noting down some of the things that you were talking about independently, because you hadn't met before today, about the same sort of themes. The need to be resilient, making tough decisions in your career, the role of ego, focusing and controlling what you can control, having some self-awareness about yourself, the good bits and the bad bits, the importance of having a good business model, learning from mistakes, and this thing about taking care of yourself, which I didn't used to hear a lot, but you hear about it more and more, and it's kind of really important. But my point was, Diane, you were talking about the skills that were promoted in the field of finance, and it was these alpha skills that you're talking about, and from memory it's things like determination and desire to be in control and confidence and this strong sense of self thing. Now, we teach a lot of this sort of stuff as well, but we also stress the importance of the soft skills like you were talking about, communication, listening, and things like empathy that at the time frame you're talking about weren't particularly cool.
No.
So all I'm saying is, Diane, to you initially, what do you think the most important skills in leading in an organisation? And then maybe Diane first, and then maybe Angela can chip in and see if they're any different.
Focus is really, really important. So being able to join the dots and focus on what are the things that you need to focus on most that'll take you forward in different time frames. What do I need to focus on today? What do I need to focus on in 3 months? What should I be looking at in 6 months? And creating that almost time plan for yourself. That's really, really important. But I think being able to connect and communicate. So I think you need to lead and to lead teams. You've just got to be an outstanding communicator in whatever way that you find to do that. It can be, you could be writing great documents. You don't, if you're scared of kind of public speaking or whatever it is, you can find different ways to you can draw pictures. You can find also, but you've got to be a good communicator at all levels to be able to communicate with your stakeholders, but also being able to communicate with all levels of staff within your organisation and connect with them on what matters to them, but you being able to convey to them what matters to you and what matters to the organisation, and connecting that up. So I think those two things, an absolute supreme focus and being really ruthless with your time, and just outstanding communication.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with both of those things. They're certainly important, and I did really appreciate the way that we had synergy points in our talk about these things. And
Yeah.
it was interesting hearing your experience from when these skills were not valuable. Because we do now talk about emotional intelligence, and it is seen as desirable now. But yeah, you're right. There was a time where that wasn't seen as a benefit. I think, to be honest, what I've learned the most comes down to balance. And when I first started out, I thought I could just work and work and work, and I absorbed myself so much into the business that when the business failed, I had an identity crisis because the business was me. I don't think that's healthy, and I don't think it's necessary. My business probably grew faster because of it, but it also failed faster as well. So I think it's very important for people to realise that your business is just part of your life. And that can be hard to hear for people who are devoting, every minute of the day to it. But it is a separate entity. And if it fails, you have to still be okay. So make time for family, make time for friends, make time for your health. And, if you don't, I think that's exactly something similar will happen in the way that life will just give you a gentle reminder that you need to focus on your health. And if you ignore the gentle reminders for 10 years, life will smack you over the head with a sledgehammer and tell you need to focus on your health. So try and be more aware of the reminders. It's okay to take time out. I mean, I think post-COVID, it's definitely, we're more okay talking about things like mental health and saying we're a bit stressed. And so take time out, take sabbaticals, build resilience into your business that you don't have to be sitting at a desk 9 to 5, build multiple streams of income so that you can always have passive income. But yeah, I would definitely say it's about balance for me.
I'm going to put a couple of questions here together, and starting with yourself, Diane. It's getting questions coming in asking about is there a network where women can connect with that you could recommend, as well as Angela could recommend. So I was kind of thinking along those lines of, you're both here, you're both women in business, and that's what I'd be recommending to the person that's asking the question. But there's also the Women in Business Network website, which exists, where people can connect with events and supports in the local area. But mixing that with another question, Diane, it's also interesting did you have any role models that you looked up to, in terms of, was there any female role models you looked at?
Yeah, so with the kind of networking bit, I think for me, there are lots of local things that you can look up, and there's lots of women in business networks. But I think conferences have been a real source of kind of meeting people, and being able to kind of meet people who are both in your orbit and aren't. So I found conferences quite useful from that perspective. In terms of well, I've got a female and a male role model, actually, if I'm allowed to do that.
Absolutely.
It's So female role model is somebody I've had the kind of privilege to come into contact with and work with, a lady called Sasha Romanovich. And Sasha was the CEO of Grant Thornton in the UK, and she's now the CEO of Fair for All Finance, which is an investment organisation. And I think the kind of male role model, and they're both for similar reasons, which is really interesting, is a man called Daniel Sattar, who's the CEO at Big Issue Invest, and that's the investment arm of the Big Issue magazine. They're both outstanding communicators, without a shadow of a doubt, and I admire them. And why are they kind of outstanding communicators? I think it's that humility and wisdom thing again. Sasha, I can remember when I was particularly low about a kind of investment thing that had gone wrong. Was basically said to me that could have a massive impact on my organisation. When you're in the crap, you can choose to wallow, or you can choose to clean yourself off and get on with it. And it was a real kind of get up and a resilience moment, and was a real testament to how resilient she's had to be in different business situations. And then with Daniel, one of the most gentle human beings I've ever met, but absolute strength and conviction, but delivers it with such calmness and composure, and that hasn't always been my way of delivery, and it's got me into trouble on occasion. So I think being able to kind of role model that you can have absolute conviction, but you can do it with gentleness and composure, and be outstanding communicators. So it would be, two real life people that I get to, I don't get to hang out with that often, but, I've had the privilege to meet and sometimes work with, and I'm really, they've been real role models for me in my career.
That's fantastic. And Angela, it's in terms of the same sort of question to yourself about women in business and that you've come across in the business network that you'd recommend, or along the lines of was there a role model or role models that you looked up to?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just like to say, I do think it's important for women in business to not only have role models who are women in business. At the end of the day, we tend that we can silo ourselves and only connect with other women in business, but we really can't, and we shouldn't want to either. So I think it's great to have heroes of both the genders. I have quite an interesting one, because I've obviously not been networking for a couple of years now, and when I set my business, I was very inspired by super driven women who set up high growth businesses and raised a lot of money. One of them is now going to jail, and the other one's business failed. So my role models were Elizabeth Holmes and Sophia Amoruso. So I really don't want to comment on this, but I think that's also part of it as well. I think part of it is looking at the sort of surrounding fanfare of these people that we look up to as well. And actually, I think it's about connecting, like Diane does, with the local people who are doing really good work. The people that you're reading the books of and you're seeing on TED Talks and are talked about, they're often the people who are faking it till they make it, who are blagging it, who are struggling themselves to get by, but they just have a very good PR team and very deep pockets. So I think get out there in your community and connect with the local women in business networks. WIB is a fantastic one, and I'm actually going to reconnect with them. The founder of that, Teresa, I'm not sure if it's her that still does it, she also has a co-working space that's based in Merchant City in Glasgow, which is another fantastic way to meet other people. So I wouldn't limit yourself only to women-only business events. Of course, if that's where you feel safe, no problem at all, but I would definitely put yourself out there and see everything as a networking event. I used to be a nightmare to even take to the pub when I was setting up my business, because guaranteed I was talking to the barman about his business idea for selling deck chairs in Ibiza, So tell everybody you're starting a business, talk to everybody about business, and just absorb yourself in that kind of mindset. And then I think the contacts will come to you.
Well, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Dan, what would you say has been the greatest factor in your success to date?
Probably keeping my mouth shut. at the appropriate moment. Determination, and just that never giving up, because I think my life could have taken all sorts of directions, and I think certainly kind of what happened to me in my early life could have limited quite significantly, where things go. So I think that almost belief that you kind of master of your own destiny, and you can 24 hours later something's always just that bit better than it is, and being able to kind of just bounce back from knockbacks has absolutely been the thing that's carried me forward, and keeping my mouth shut at the appropriate moment.
And would you say that was it was the motivation to get you through when times were tough?
Yeah, just and it has been that kind of in the moment you can feel like I just want to go and hide somewhere, because I just in this 12 hours I can't cope with this, and just 24 hours later everything is always kind of just, even if it's only minuscule, it's slightly better.
Yep, no, that's sound advice. And again, to you, Angela, what would you say the greatest factor in your success to date has been?
Yeah, I mean, resilience, like Diane said, I mean, absolutely important. And I think flexibility and the ability to adapt to, situations. I've certainly been in some situations where something bad has happened or a setback has happened, and I've just got to right back up and hit my head off the same wall. So, it's about being resilient and getting back up, but also then assessing the situation and saying, is there a reason that I keep coming up against roadblocks here? So I think being able to adapt my business model, being able to remain quite a lean business model, and being able to basically change has really helped me. But absolutely, I think underpinning it all is just resilience, and it's a lot harder than it sounds. And it's easy for me and Diane to sit here and say, yeah, just get back up. It's really tough, and there are some things which you just don't want to get back up from, but take whatever time you need. Recovery time can be anything from a couple of minutes to a couple of years. Take whatever time you need and just make sure you get back up and keep moving forward.
That certainly chimes with me, and I'm sure it chimes with the panel as well as the audience listening there. It's about, staying in there, and giving it another go. Certainly, there's times that things happen. Personally as well, and I know that's happened as well for members of the panel. Diane, you mentioned before just about that change, between working all, and again, Angela, you were the same, but putting this to Diane was just about that juggling the personal life and the professional life, and then, from yourself, how do you, it's just, how have you
That's my
managed that?
husband.
How you managed?
I'm sure he thinks I don't manage it half as well as I should. I think I've got quite an obsessive compulsive nature, which means that whatever I'm kind of in, I'm usually in it 200% all the time, and I have to kind of control that kind of becoming obsessed with things. And I think it, over balancing work and home life, it's led to a lot of challenges. At the point where I kind of started to move out of the commercial sector and into the not-for-profit sector, my personal life was okay. I'd got married, had a family and everything, but I wasn't really present at home. I was kind of, not just present in the workplace, and kind of half listening at home, and too tired to kind of do much. So I think it is important. You don't necessarily have to change careers overnight and think I'm going to go into a whole brand new sector, but I think stepping back and kind of taking care of yourself is valued much more, perhaps, even 5 years ago, 10 years ago, in that, it was about this all out, people, and I still meet people like this who kind of wear working all hours and being tired all the time and back-to-back meetings. They wear it like a kind of badge of honour, in almost that being busy is the ultimate sign of success. And I think being not busy can be the ultimate sign of success. And if you're burnt out, you're no good to either. You're no good to your family, and life is short. And you're no good to your organisation either. So I think I've made so many mistakes on that front that you not prioritizing or prioritizing different things at different times. But I think it's hugely important to have that balance, because you can be earning all of the money in the world, but if you're not living the life you want to live, pointless.
Yeah, no, I can't think of any. Somebody had asked me before coming on here about give 2 examples of the hardest thing you can put a person through. And I'd have struggled to find those 2 examples compared to what you've actually experienced. And it's not an example; it's been real life. From you heading up the family, in a situation where you're 18-year-old, and then
Yeah.
same question over to Angela, which is, you find yourself in a country, which I wouldn't go into for the political reasons. I won't go into the details of that, but as you described, you're over there, you're in Kuwait, you're looking at doing something in Dubai, and how did you juggle that personal life, professional life? Because I know that you touched on the fact that you didn't want to come back to who wouldn't want to come to Paisley? It's a great place, but why you didn't want to then fly directly back to Paisley? And you touched on the fact that you didn't want to be seen as things not being as successful as it was. But what did you go through in terms of juggling your personal and professional life when you're at that point?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I am and I have been in the grateful position where it was never my desire to have a family. It was never my desire to have children. So I don't know how I would have done any of what I've done in the last 10 years. But for me, it wasn't a trade-off. That was a decision I knew no matter what I did, that I wasn't going to have kids. I feel very, very bad for people who do have that decision to make, because I really do think that there's sacrifices that have to be made on both sides. As Diane was saying, you've got to also make sure you're putting your family first. Thankfully, I choose boyfriends like I choose role models, so we don't have anything to worry about in terms of the personal life. Very easy to fly away from them. But yeah, when it comes to the sort of failure of coming home, I think that is something about where we're from as well. I've heard it described as tall poppy syndrome, which is people are happy for you, but they're happy for you up to a point. And they call it that because in poppy fields, poppies grow to the exact same height. And if a poppy grows slightly taller than the other flowers need to actually attack the roots until it's brought down to size. And I do think we have a little bit of that culture here, which is we think everybody who's wealthy got there by being corrupt. We celebrate the downfall of celebrities, maybe not as much now, but we certainly used to in the 90s and the 90s. It was all about, oh, look at them, they got too big for their boots. We have lots of words for people who try to pretend they're better than us, but it's not about trying to be better than other people. It's just about being a better version of yourself. I have personally found that better version of myself does not come with any personal baggage. So I've enjoyed the freedom of that. But, you've ruined it now that I'm back in Paisley. I'm just going to have to get settled down. So thanks, Patrick.
No, that's it. And then get sort of, that's what we want. We want you back in Paisley. You want to bring this. Our mission, to those that are on the channel today and those that will watch the recording of it, is we, and especially in the School of Business and Creative Industries, want to be across all of our campuses, so not just Paisley. We want to be the business school of choice for the communities we serve. We want to engage with them. So when you talked before about maybe popping into Starbucks or having a coffee somewhere and talking to people, we just want to get the message out there that all of our campuses, all 5 of them, are open to the public. Come in and use this space, it's yours. And then that'll increase your networking opportunities as well, because no doubt you'll recognise some of the mug shots of the middle-aged white men like myself and Alan that you can pick on. We usually seem to be floating around coffee shops, so you can get us. Glad to introduce you to other people as well. So it'd be great to, it is great to have you in Paisley, Angela. Diane, what's the biggest business decision you've made so far in your career, and why was it so important?
Funding, I think, has been the biggest decision I've made in my career, and choosing funding and choosing it wisely. I think who you choose to partner with on that can be really, really important, especially when perhaps you're in an organisation where you desperately need funds, and there's different partners kind of offering you different things. I think choosing who you think will be right for your business long term, and having the courage to not just take the easy money that's coming, but maybe take longer and find the right partner, is certainly one of the most important decisions that I ever took in terms of when we really started to raise large chunks of money when I was at Moneyline, definitely.
And would you say is that then informed what your future career goals are going to be going through that journey? And taking those decisions, is that then kind of shaped where you've mentioned before just about what you're currently doing, and also you'd mentioned the fact that you don't see it as a day or a number that's fixed down that you'll then say, oh, that's when I'm not going to do this anymore. Your view and your future career goals, is it to see just where it takes you, keep in there?
Yeah, and choose who to partner with who you want to do your best work with. Choosing that in that kind of business situation, but also now, I want to get involved in. I've been in frontline services and that frontline delivery and leading that. I've learned a lot about the system. So now, around investment, around financial policy, around financial inclusion. And I want to use all of that lived experience, frontline knowledge of delivery to now start influencing the system and picking people to work with to do that. So yeah, definitely influenced future career. And it's not finite. Careers now, things are not lifelong. You can choose to go in all sorts of different directions. And I think different knowledge is valued in different ways now than perhaps it was when I first started my career.
And I'd ask the same, Angela, in terms of that big decision you're taking, the sort of why was it so important, and what your future career goals are from that?
Yeah, so I think the biggest decision I took after deciding to start a business was deciding to close the business. And I think, sometimes the toughest thing to do is the thing that you absolutely don't want to do is actually the best option. So one of the most career defining decisions for me was to close my offices, was to lay off my staff. I also knew that I wanted to do it in an ethical way. I paid every single member of staff until they found a new paying job. I made sure that I was the only one that served. I paid back people who would give money to the business. So I knew that I had to do it in an ethical way, that I could still look at myself in the mirror 20 years from now and be able to sleep at night. But I also knew that it had to be done. I may have survived the hits that came with the business, but I knew that my heart wouldn't be in it, and I would be running a completely different business from what I wanted to do. So actually getting rid of that business, closing it down, being honest with myself, recovering from that, and then setting up a much more flexible way of working was one of the best decisions I ever made. And it has informed every life choice since then. Because now when I look at an opportunity, I think about the freedom associated with it. It's not about how much money am I going to make from this. It's what's the value of my time, in terms of, can I still decide that I don't want to do it one day? Can I decide, do I still have ownership over my decisions? And I think a lot of the opportunities that come up for businesses and for partnerships are really focused on being at a certain place at a certain time for a certain period. And that's a job. So I need to make sure that I'm reminding myself that it's not about having a job, it's about being an entrepreneur and having the freedom. And sometimes that involves having a job where you're doing it in an entrepreneurial way. So it's really redefined to me what actual entrepreneurship is. It's not about the structures, it's not about the hierarchies, it's definitely a mindset, and I think that would change the rest of my life. Hopefully it'll start making money at it soon. That'd be nice, but it's not the end goal.
Well, I've never met a digital nomad before, Angela, so that's been a first for me today.
Exciting. Do you know, I didn't even realise I was one until a millennial told me that's what I was called. I was like, okay, I'll take it.
I was going to say I've been called quite a few things, but not a digital nomad yet. But I'm sure that'll be added. No, it's been an absolutely fantastic session from you both. I've enjoyed listening to you both, and there's plenty of advice there. There's advice that you keep telling yourself, and it's just having that sort of, as you say, resilience to stick with it. So thanks ever so much to both of you, and thanks for the questions that are coming in and taking the time to answer those so openly and honestly. I think at this point, I'd be passing over back to Alan there for his closing comments.
Thanks, Patrick. So that concludes this session for our entrepreneur discussion series. Is to say thanks to both of our guest speakers for sharing their inspiring stories. Lots to think about. Just a reminder that we've recorded this session and we'll be pushing out the recording of that to media channels over the next few days. And thanks also to Yemi for organising. We're back at the helm for the next one, and also for Emma for managing the online event, to our online audience for joining us. And I hope we'll see you again at the next event. Stay safe.